My name is Martin Matter with the Witness to War Foundation. It is March 23rd, 2015, and we are in Hiawassee, Georgia. I'm sitting with Mr. Ash Rothlein, Ashrothlein, who served in the European Theater of World War II in the United States Army in the 187th Ordnance Field Depot Company. How are you doing today, Ash?
Great.
Glad to hear it. My first question is, where are you from originally?
I was born in New York and spent the first part of my life there, and then a major part in Miami, Florida. And then post-war, I went back to New York and then back to Florida. But I traveled a lot, so I consider myself universal.
Tell me about your family growing up.
My family, well, my father was a builder in Florida, and my I had two brothers, and we went to, we all graduated from high school in Miami, Florida, and then I went right to World War II, to England for a year, and then over to Normandy.
Well, first, could you recall where you were on the day of Pearl Harbor?
I was in Miami, and I remember that very well. I was 14, I guess, and it was a monumental day, and we all had our Patriot gear and attitude ready, and so shortly after I graduated from high school, I tried to get into the Air Corps, but I was almost taken, but then they gave me the colorblind test, and I'm colorblind, that it wouldn't take me. So then I didn't have time to try anything else. They drafted me. And on July 17th, 1943, I sailed for Europe.
Tell me about your basic training. What do you recall about that?
Tough. We were combat trained, and the usual stuff with, if you don't raise your head or your eyes or anything, well, you'll be machine gunned, and this is hot summer weather in Texas. But it was okay. We got fit. And I guess, I was probably just 18 and a half, and then right after my 19th birthday, then we went overseas, spent almost a year there until Normandy.
Well, tell me about your trip to England. What was that ship ride like?
Well, if you wanted to get a good night's sleep, find a couple of rails. It was okay. They told us how to behave when we get to land in Liverpool, and never use the word bloody. So the first thing we do when we land is, "Hey, you bloody Yanks! Great to see you." I remember that. And then we were in several areas. We wound up doing most of our basic in Wales, Cardiff, and then from there we went to Southampton on our way to in guess it was late June, I guess. But when we arrived, it was a rocky trip, that's for sure. I mean, I think anything you read today, you'll find that the weather was even though it was June, it was treacherous in the sea. But when I landed in Normandy, there were thousands of ships and thousands of vehicles and armaments on the beach. And the infantry was, I'd say, I could still hear all the shelling and everything. And there were night bombings. And we just, but I had, it's a big word, but it's so effective, a seismic experience when I landed, because as we trekked or drove up the steep slope, there was a cemetery there with hundreds, thousands of our fallen soldiers. And to me, that was a searing moment that has lived with me. We were all sad, angry, and vowed never to let a single one of them be forgotten. And so that was a big moment for me. And so we all did our job through the war.
Where was the first stop you made once you made your way inland?
Well, I guess there was a breakthrough to Sand Low. Are you familiar with Sand Low? We were there, I guess, a few weeks already when in a field living. We were in slit trenches is where we slept. So that was really nothing but, that wasn't a town. But I would say the first really memorable experience was when we got word that the troops, the front was moving, because we got out of our slit trenches one day and 3,000 bombers flew over us, and we couldn't stop screaming with joy. And that was the raid on Sand Low. And so we immediately were told to let's go. And we were a convoy of 140 vehicles, armaments, tanks, and what have you. And off we went. And on our way, we rounded a curve, and up on the crest of a hill was a village or a little town. And you could hear the rumble of 140 vehicles and stuff. And I happened to be in the lead vehicle, a 6x6 that was not covered. It needed a covering. And it was a nasty day, too. It was raining. And as we approached the town, we heard the bells ring. And the minute we got up there, it seemed like the entire town, 10 deep, came out and cheered and waved and gave us cheese and what have you. And so we stood out there and handed them cigarettes and what have you. And it was such an incredible incredible experience that to this day I'll always feel like people around the world, we're all one, you know, when we're doing something of value for humanity. And that freed them. I mean, this town, you know, we didn't free them from combat. They were out of there. But I guess we were the first to pass through that little village. So those are two experiences that, you know, live with me like they're yesterday.
And how far away from the front lines were you, approximately?
It varied. I mean, in the Normandy invasion campaign, I'd say could be a quarter of a mile, and maybe, yeah. I mean, there's no signs that say this is the front, so I made a couple of mistakes, and one lieutenant came out of his foxhole and said, "Turn around, you should have made a right turn because you're dropping off some stuff for us. And if you don't get out of here in 30 seconds, right down there, 100 yards away, is a howitzer just about to zero in on you, so move." But, you know, it got, when we broke through then we just followed the front, but we were never that. Normandy was the key. We, you know, where we were mostly exposed to gunfire and bombings and mines and false gas attacks and stuff. But it was all part of a day's work. We were fine.
Do you come across any other civilians that really stand out in your mind, other than the ones that were giving out all the food?
Well, yeah, I did. I mean, people went crazy when we arrived in Paris, and every little stop we made, and we made stops all the way up to Germany, into Germany, and central France and northern France. So there were, you know, nothing that, you know, I made anything deep and lasting, but they did make some like that in Britain before we crossed the Channel. But it was you know, I was there until the end of both wars, and even 6 months after, because we had to take a lot of the equipment and send it to home or back to Britain or wherever. But I did make, yeah, I shouldn't, I got ahead of myself a little. And when we were in Belgium, I made a close friendship with a Belgian French family, and I even worked in her little garden planting potatoes, and her daughter and I became close friends. But she was engaged to a prisoner of war in Germany, but we were just friends, you know. And we kept up a correspondence, the family and I, in fact, I went back to see them and kept up a correspondence with her husband and the daughter, until maybe 10 years ago or less. So that was a rich experience.
Tell me about going into Germany. What was that like?
Well, we went to as far as Ludwigshafen or Mannheim. That was as far as we got before they surrendered. And we had to do some, they sort of kicked us around. We had a stint with the 1st French Army that needed assistance, so they sent us over there to help them organize their troops and their equipment that they were receiving. So almost every city in Germany was just totally flattened. So, they were, and when we followed through there, I mean, they were bombed to the earth. So there was nothing to remember about that it was worth talking about.
How similar did Germany look to war-torn France? Was it equally or more devastated?
It was more devastated. There was a lot of devastation, but then they were, the Nazis didn't. They preserved Paris, and the Germans preserved a couple of cities there. I don't remember their names, but I will in a minute. But I'm too bad you're not interested in the post-war.
We'll get there in a minute. I'm just going to kind of work our way through.
Oh, okay.
Did you meet any German people during your time there?
Only prisoners.
Any of them notable in any way?
No, not really.
And how much longer did you stay in Germany?
Well, I stayed there until December 1945. And so that was 6 months after. Yeah, May 8th was the end. And so, yeah, it was another 7 months.
And any memorable stories about the occupation?
No, we never got to Auschwitz, but we saw so much human devastation. It was sad, regardless. I mean, you can't crucify the German people because of the Nazi regime, but you can hold them responsible, but to a limit, No, we were, a band of brothers doing a job. That's what we did.
Tell me about coming home. What was that like for you?
That was incredible. It was a cold December day, and when we passed the Statue of Liberty and landed in Ellis Island, I mean, we all started crying because there were ladies there giving us apple pie, which was something we hadn't seen for years. But in that, the return of World War II vets was phenomenal. They did everything in the world for us. You know, we all had education for 4 years, and treatment for veterans who needed it for health and emergency. They were great, and we all went our own way doing whatever we planned to do in our life.
And what'd you do?
Well, the first thing that I did was go to work as a truck driver, because that's what I did in the war. I drove a gas truck for my brother, who was also, he was in the Air Force, retired before me, and he started a little construction company to build 28 houses for veterans, because the Veterans Administration had a 95%, I believe, loan payable in 20, 30 years, and so he advertised for these 28 houses to be fully furnished, and sold them all in one day on a Sunday in advance, and then started building them, and everything was running smooth and fine until a band of contractors in Florida who seemed to control who gets what were just shocked that they didn't get the job because they weren't the low bidder. And so these contractors banded together to make it impossible for us to do the job. They didn't send out inspectors or what have you. And so finally, when we're about 4 to 5 weeks from finishing, they got a notice from the government that if we don't finish the job within 5 days instead of 5 weeks, the loan is rescinded. And so my brother said, well, it's over. And I was just a truck driver driving the materials to the job. And I just said to him, you got till Friday, why don't we try doing something? He says, I say, call the superintendent and the engineer on the job, and no, he said, it's impossible. So then they said, well, okay, close it up by tonight. And that's when I said, don't close it, just let me go out there and spend the week, okay? And so he and his partner says, let him do it, okay? So I went out there, and a magical happening. I had no idea. I don't know anything about construction. Don't know anything about anything. I'm just a soldier who got out of the war, and I had no idea where I'm going in my life. 21-year-old kid. So I was really so angry after what these guys did, that I had a bullhorn and a Jeep, and the trades are out there working, and I called them all in and said, told them what was happening. And I said, would you guys work overtime tonight, and let's talk about what we might be able to do? So they all agreed to work overtime, and so I sent down to this little village called Opelika, which was nothing, you know. And I ordered 500 sandwiches and coffee, and then the police came out, two policemen, the whole town, and they offered to help. There was a little hardware store. The neighborhood was filled with homes. They came out and got excited. All the trades got excited, and they agreed to come in the next morning at 6 o'clock and stay and keep working. So every trade went crazy. They didn't want to leave. And this went on until on Thursday. The people are working on all trades except the roof had to have the tile put on. You know, I dried it in and had electric temporary in there and everything. And they were the key. If they could finish the tile on the roofs, we'd be okay, but it was raining, their hands were raw, the tile was slipping, and I had sent out for them all to get new gloves. And so finally it comes from down, the roofers are off the roof, the roofers are off the roof. They didn't finish. So I went in to the office where they all congregated to get ready to leave, and I just I thanked them, every single one of them. Gave them a big hug and said, "You did fantastic. Come back for your money tomorrow." And when I walked away from there and got in my Jeep, I said, you know, I gave it everything I had, and then I was okay with it. And the next thing I heard was, the roofers are back on the roof. And they finished it. And we finished the job on Friday and got the loan. And to me, that was such a major happening for me. It said, I can do this from nowhere. I'll try anything. And so that was the story of my life. I felt it gave, each thing that I challenged myself with was a confidence builder and a transformational growth to the next step. And all the steps where I became a general contractor, and I built things for the Army and the Navy, and research and development. And then I never really felt that I was close to anything. In other words, I was doing things for big institutions or organizations, and it was fine, and I felt good about it. But I didn't have that closeness until a few years ago. I took a course, a writing course, because I like to write, and I had some articles that were published in a bunch of newspapers and other places. And in the class, it was a little class of a teacher and like 7 women. And one of the women was about 70. She said, my father was in Normandy, and he never told me about the war, ever, anything. Would you mind telling us anything or writing about it? And so that brought me out. And that made me want to do things on a personal level with with veterans and with organizations. And when I went to the D-Day Memorial, then I realized that I could do a lot here to help. And that's, I'm still doing that, and that's going to be my legacy for however many days, years, months I got left.
What other sort of problems do you think veterans face coming home from World War II?
Well, it depends on what the veterans who were deeply wounded. I'm only talking about World War II now, but although I understand the Afghan and even Vietnam, and I would say they came home from those wars without the kind of tremendous treatment we were able to get from every avenue, you know, hospitalization and education. I mean, it's a different world today, and so when we came home, I mean, there wasn't the kind of PTSD that were in the later wars, and so we had the opportunity with all of our problems of readjusting to civilian life. You know, when you're a 21-year-old and you've spent 3 years in a war and in the service, and then you're thrust into civilian life, you got a lot of growing to do, and a lot of psychological stuff to get straightened out and grow. And I think the people that I met, the veterans, and most all of them were had their heads on straight and their emotions pretty good, and they were in the doing service things, and so and they really helped the United States really grow. And you got to give the civilians as much credit for it, because it was like a unity you can't quantify.
Were there any other stories from the war or post-war that you were looking to tell? Anything else that you might like to add?
Well, I think I've given you a bird's eye view of that, except where now I'm involved in being a member of my Gang of Five to develop an education center and museum at the National D-Day Memorial. And that's a lifetime project for me and beyond. And so I'd say the 70th anniversary was an amazing experience, because I was able to, and every one of us was able to, you know, get that band of brothers feeling. And they even had, you know, a reunion tent in case any happened to meet somebody that they knew. And you know, we're not many left in terms of how many we were, and so that's an experience that we want to pass on to all generations that they shall never be forgotten, the World War II vets. I mean, I happen to be in Normandy, but I'm sure the Pacific and every soldier I've ever met from any war is worthy of great care and consideration for his service.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much for taking the time to come by and tell me your story and your insights on the life of veterans coming home. It's been a real honor and a pleasure, but most importantly, I'd like to thank you very much for your service.
Thank you. I appreciate it.